Welcome back. The British government's decision to charge £3,000 or about rupees 2.8 lakhs as security deposit for visas from Indians has met with considerable anger and resistance from Indians across the country, as well as Britain's decision to club India with countries like Pakistan, Bangladesh and Nigeria is being seen by many as selectively discriminatory.
If you intend to visit Britain, be ready to shell out £3,000 as the UK is going ahead with its discriminatory visa policy, showing absolutely no care for India's concerns. Britain will collect £3,000 as refundable cash bond from Indians, deeming it necessary to collect this amount from the people who come under the high-risk category, that is, those who are unlikely to return from UK, which according to them includes Indians.
We are in touch. At the time that we initially got in touch with them, they said that it wasn't, it was only an idea, it was just something that was being considered. It was not something that had reached the stage of implementation. If it does reach the stage of implementation, then we certainly will see what needs to be done.
The British Home Office has called it a policy aimed at bringing down illegal immigration. On one hand, they came up with a same-day visa policy to expedite the process of visa issuance. On the other hand, they have made visa bonds compulsory, also introducing a new family immigration policy which would put an earning cap of £18,600 per annum for a British citizen. Even those with refugee status will have to earn that much to be able to sponsor their non-European spouse's visa. We spoke to the lawyer who challenged this in court and got some relief for affected families.
We as Indians take reservation of that proposed policy. The policy is still not there in papers, but having said that, if such a policy comes into play, then that policy is definitely amenable to judicial review, and we would be thinking in terms of challenging it in the High Court on the basis one of the arguments would be that it is discriminatory.
What is also upsetting is that India has been clubbed with countries like Nigeria, Ghana, Pakistan and Sri Lanka. India has been included in this list despite Indian investment in London alone crossing £1.3 billion. Thus, it is highly likely that this move will dent the India-UK relations.
It will be a huge loss, and I think it's really important that we go back to a system where people respect each other, and this £3,000 bond or whatever the amount is will really affect the viability of that relationship. It's a bad idea and it should not be allowed to happen.
For now, sources in the Ministry of External Affairs have told Times Now that discussions are on between New Delhi and London, and India has expressed its concerns over this discriminatory policy. While India has suggested further discussions at a senior level, the UK has conveniently kept India on tenterhooks as far as this controversial and retrograde measure is concerned.
All eyes are on the governments in London and in New Delhi to come out more clearly and with more answers on this highly sensitive issue of visas and bonds. And to answer our questions, we have with us Mr. Mark Runacres, former British Deputy High Commissioner in Delhi and now the head of the British Business Group in India. Mr. Runacres, Prime Minister David Cameron in his last visit to India had said that the relationship Britain has with India is a special relationship and it's a strategic partnership that he plans to build even further on. But by putting India in the company of countries like Pakistan, Bangladesh and Nigeria, many of us in India feel the relationship is anything but special. Your views?
I think that it's important, first of all, to say, Maroof, that in making announcements of this sort, it's very dangerous to begin saying we don't want to be grouped with this country or with that country. I understand the sentiments behind your description of the group of countries, but I think each country needs to be looked at on its merits. Having said that, I very much doubt that the Prime Minister, nor indeed I suspect the Indian government, will feel that this announcement, if that's what we can really call it, will significantly impact Britain's desire to have a strategic partnership, a special relationship with India. I think we have to look quite carefully at what those announcements are, and there have been 2 announcements as I understand it. They have been far from clear, which is a great shame, but what they've talked about is putting in place a pilot to see whether a scheme of putting in place bonds for certain high-risk categories of visa applicants could be workable. We don't know any of the details, we don't know how it will be implemented. So what we're talking about really is an experiment, as I understand it, and one on which we need to hear a lot more before we start taking any particular judgments.
Well, there's also a view amongst many Indians that the government in the UK is probably trying to humor certain political constituencies, and at the same time, whatever the clarifications of the scheme, it will have a negative effect on a large number of Indian middle class people, and India is having, as you would know only too well, a huge middle class which is expected to surpass the population of the entire European Union in a few years' time. And this in turn, with the middle class veering away from the UK because of the hassles with the visas, would probably certainly impact on British revenues through tourism. Even the student community that had traditionally gone to the UK are being picked up by the Australians, Canadians, Americans. So really, Britain's going to put itself into a huge disadvantage.
I suspect the picture is not quite as grim as you portray it, Maroof. But I do think that the reactions of the Indian middle class, and indeed all kinds and types of Indians who might be interested in coming to the UK, will be negative to this announcement. And I think it's been extremely rash of the British government to make an announcement of this sort without being absolutely clear about what it is that they're trying to do, or more importantly, how they're going to implement this pilot. And I fear that I must agree with you, unusual as that may be, Maroof, on the point that I fear there is a domestic constituency that is being played to here, and that there is clearly damage going on in terms of Britain's image as being open for business.
Well, going along with you, there is a view also that the policy, which will probably be selectively implemented, is going to try to weed out potential immigrants. But there is an angle to it, and which is that there are a lot of people who might appear on paper to be potential immigrants, but they've had family members in the UK for decades, and just a visit by them to catch up with, old uncles and aunts and grandparents would also be blocked, because they might appear to be financially not as affluent as the normal tourist who would apply for a visa.
I will tell you my relatively strong view on this question of visa bonds, particularly set at the sort of level that they're talking about. One, if people are such a high-risk category that they're worrying sufficiently to ask for a bond, you have to ask the question as to whether they should be being given visas at all, because, as you say, there are all kinds of people who are going for perfectly reasonable purposes, but who you can't really describe as high risk because they happen to be visiting family and have probably done so before. And therefore it's difficult to imagine exactly who these high risk visitors are who would require this bond, but who would get a visa. So that's, I think, my first quite strongly held criticism of this announcement. And the second is that, conversely, if you really look at people who are intent on immigrating illegally, and clearly there are people in that category who must be deterred and stopped, and if not stopped, then caught, I fear that a £3,000 bond, which sounds like a lot to your ordinary traveller, will not feel that much. If you're actually intent on illegal immigration, very often you've probably spent many times that figure in order to put in place the other arrangements to make that happen. So I fear that it kind of misses the point on both counts, a bond of this sort, and I shall be extremely interested to see, once the details are announced, who it is that's being targeted and why people think that it may actually be able to stop those who are intent on illegal immigration.
Thank you very much, Mr. Runnikers, for those wide-ranging answers on this highly sensitive issue of bonds for UK visas. But, as we both know, that the devil lies in the details, and the details haven't yet been spelt out. That's it on this week's episode of Latitude, and we'll be back next week with another episode. Until then, goodbye and thank you.